there was a moment when President Trump attacked me on Truth Social. I was out for a jog. That's how I found out. My phone suddenly blew up, and it was very stressful. I was very stressed. So I finished my run, and I walked in the door, and my youngest daughter, my 2-year-old, came running up and gave me a big hug. And I kind of felt like, okay, things will be okay. Even though my kids can also be very stressful, but in a very different way than getting a Truth Social attack from the president. I'm Ashley Parker, and I'm a staff writer at The Atlantic. I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and if you were growing up then, every family was either a Newsweek house or a Time house, and those covers were iconic, and we were a Time house. So I read Time magazine. I have no memory of this, but my mom claims, and it sounds true, that when I was 12 or so, I read an article in Time magazine, and I turned to my parents and said, well, I could write this. Which was probably not true. It sounds true that I said that. It does not sound true that I actually could have written an article that could have run in Time magazine when I was 12. Oh, so this is not an answer I've been told that any journalist is actually supposed to give, but I actually really like writing. Writing was my first love, and then I very quickly realized that the currency of newspapers, or magazines too, is news. And so I sort of trained myself to be a reporter so I would have things to write about. My first front page story was a profile of Barack Obama's body man, Reggie Love. At the time, it felt like I was never gonna get a front page story in the New York Times, and it just felt like I'd achieved all I was ever going to achieve in life, and I could die happy. My colleagues make fun of me, and it feels very antiquated. What I have to do is I kind of take all of my notes, whatever, longhand or in a Google Doc, but then in order to start writing in an ideal world, I need to print them all out and annotate them, and I have a whole system with different markings and different colored pens, and I kind of, like, my final sheet kind of looks like Carrie from Homeland when she's really close to solving a case, and only then can I sit down and actually start piecing together a story. So I recently wrote a piece for The Atlantic about a miscarriage I had between my 2 younger daughters and pregnancy loss in general. I really liked that story. I've always wanted to be a magazine writer, despite only recently finally arriving at The Atlantic and in a magazine. My only skill, but it's a good skill, is the ability to work really, really hard. And if you have that skill, especially in journalism, you'll be fine. And also in a world in journalism where journalism increasingly feels like, there's some people who can they're great reporters, but they can't really write, or there's people who are great writers, but they can't really report, or there's, but like, if you can do all the things and even a pretty basic level, like you can write and you can report and you can act like an adult who doesn't have tantrums and hits deadline and generally treats people with collegiality and respect, like if you can do all of those things, you'll be a hero in journalism. It'll be very easy to succeed if you can do all of these basic things at like a pretty basic level. It's not that hard. Is that an obnoxious answer? Does that sound obnoxious? Okay.